What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Tanner Farmstead podcast. My name is Dirk. I'm your host, and I'm really excited today about having Nick Gann with Gann Farm Raised. Nick's also a farmer in Central Arkansas, relatively close to where I'm at, and he's doing some cool stuff. Just really excited to hear his story and ask him a lot of questions about farming. So, Gann, thanks for Nick. Nick, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it, man.
It's funny that you referred to me as Gann, probably by accident, but you hear me do that all the time. I'm like,
Yep.
come on, Gann.
Well,
You
I get
know,
that all the time too. People call me Tanner, and I'm like, I'm like, my
yeah, I think,
friend's
hey,
Tanner.
I did that. I remember doing that. It's like, I don't know, get used to it, right?
100%. Especially if your social media has your last name first. It just people start calling you what your social media tag is. So, anyways, we'll fill us
Yeah,
in a little bit on where you're farming and kind of what your focus is, and just kind of take us back. What got you into farming, and share a little bit of that story.
yeah, sure. So I grew up farming. I actually grew up on a large hog farm in north central Arkansas, and I hated it. I mean, it was miserable. You in the summertime, you're hot and it stinks, and in the summertime you're freezing and it still stinks. But it's funny, just the other day I had said something about it, and I said I hated it when I was young and I miss it now. And it I guess it kind of put farming in me, maybe like gave me this uh roots, I guess. And so I wanted to get into farming. I went through a lot of things. I graduated high school, went off to college for a little bit, joined the Air Force, moved home after several years in the Air Force, and met my wife, had a couple kids, and I had this in like I had no, I don't think anybody really knew. Like my family didn't know that I really wanted to farm. Like I just had it in me to farm. And so we bought a house in 2015 with a little bit of land. I mean, you can see all of it. It's 3.5 acres. People think I have a lot of land. I don't have a lot of land. I got you can see most of it right there. I'm sitting on my back porch, by the way, and most of the videos that you see from me, if you watch my social media, are filmed, right up there. Uh, so I was able to get back into farming, but I started off. So for one, in high school, I didn't read. Man, I was not a reader. I didn't read books. I thought that was lame. My brother was always reading something. He was much smarter than me. Reading will do that for you. And for some reason, I just started reading about farming. Like I wanted to farm, so I started reading. I got a magazine. This is kind of a cool little story. So an older farmer friend of mine gave me a beef magazine, and I was reading through it and read an article by a guy an older gentleman out in Colorado. I don't know what his name was, but I read this article, and at the end of the article, it had his email address, and I thought, well, I'll shoot him an email. I have a couple questions, so I emailed him. And you know how old guys are, man. 2 weeks went by, I hadn't got an email back from him yet, and so he finally emailed me back. I think I'd probably given up on him. And he said, "Hey, you need to read this book by Walt Davis called How to Not Go Broke Ranching."
Mm.
And so I read that book and I thought, that's an interesting way to look at not just ranching and farming, but any business. And so I actually reached out to Walt. I had some questions for Walt, and Walt said, "You need to reach out to this guy in Missouri who started farming and he didn't own the land or the cattle." And so I reached out to Greg Judy because that's who he was referring to.
Yep.
And Greg Judy had a couple books and I bought them. And Dirk, I can't tell you how many times I read both of Greg Judy's books. Now, this has been like 2016, 2015, around 2015. I mean, I read those books like they look like a Bible. In my office, you go through them, and you're like, these things are falling apart. It's because I read them all the time. My kids were playing baseball, and we go to baseball games, and I'd take my books with me. And when I wasn't watching them play ball, I'd be reading books, and it was mainly those Greg Judy books. And he taught me. So Walt and Greg taught me through their books to be careful what you spend, and that you don't necessarily have to own the cattle or the land. And so I thought, find some land. And so I started looking around. I started asking people. And one thing that comes up a lot when people are talking about leasing land is they're not any land lease around here. Well, for one, they're really not trying hard to find it because there's land to lease everywhere.
Yep.
and they're also looking at what you would call pristine land. So Greg Judy taught me, and I'm going to refer to this as a conversation with Greg, but we didn't have a conversation. Although he's been very helpful, we've talked in person and we've emailed a little bit. And but when I'm reading his books, he said, Nick, you're looking for land, like you're looking at land that's like they mow it, they take care of it, the fence is good. Like they're not going to lease that. They clearly don't need you. Like look at it, like you're going to call them. You're looking for a turnkey ranch to rent. It You're going to have a hard time. It's like you need to be looking for something that you can bring value to. And so I did. I started looking at crap. I mean, that's what it was grown up fields with saplings in them. And so I started looking and I'd send a letter out. And I actually, in my, what I would call my networking of trying to find land, I learned that a friend of mine he lived on 40 acres and he didn't have very good fence. Matter of fact, I had to fix the fence before I ever put anything on it. He wasn't a farmer. He owned it with his brother and sister, and they didn't live on it. They didn't care about fixing the fence. They cared about keeping the land, but they were just having to keep it up, keep it from being a bunch of saplings everywhere. But I didn't learn about that because he was my friend. I learned about that because I was networking to try to find land, which is people, and I know this because I did this. You're looking for the wrong thing.
Yeah.
If what you're doing is not working, let's look at what you're doing. And so I learned, thanks to Greg Judy, to look for something I could bring value to. I'd drive around and I would have my GPS or my Google Maps out and GPS on there with a little blue circle, a little blue dot. And when I drive past a piece of property that I thought I might could use, like I'd screenshot it. And then I'd come home and I'd look up where that. Now I wouldn't just like come right back home and get on my computer and look up. When I found time, I'd get on my computer and I'd go to the county data and I'd look up. I'd go to that little area where my blue dot was that I had screenshotted, and I'd find out who owned that land, and I'd see how much land was there, and it'll show you kind of a diagram of what the shape is of the land. And I would send them a letter and I would just say, hey, my name's Nick, and this is what I do. And I think that I could offer you some value if you leased your land to me. Would you be willing to have a conversation? And I'll tell you, 9 out of 10 times, I didn't get a response. Thankfully, that 9 out of 10 times I didn't get a response. Because if you got a response 9 out of 10 times, you're probably going to be in a bind. Because how many of them are you going to have to tell no thanks to?
Yeah.
you know? And so sometimes you could look at that like it's a curse, but you could also look at it like it's a blessing. And so, a couple people would call here and there. And heck, I've had people that have had a letter of mine for a year. They just saved it just in case. And they call me up and say, hey, we got this over here. And this is, and you might talk with them and learn that, okay, that's not an ideal situation for them or for me. And you just thank them and you move on and they're fine with that. But there's been a couple pieces of property that I got from mailing a letter or just networking, whatever it took. And so I was leasing that land. I put a Facebook ad out that I had some land and I could graze cattle for somebody if they needed me to. They call that custom grazing.
Yeah.
Okay. And basically what you're looking for is somebody who is overstocked or undermanned. They don't have enough land or they don't have enough, they can't handle all of it themselves, maybe. And I had a guy a couple hours away send me a message. And he said, hey, I'm out of grass and I got however many 20 head of cattle that I need to send somewhere. And so we worked out a deal. I decided I was going to start charging people $1 a day. I got that from Greg Judy, like $1 a day, and plus they would pay any expenses. This dude, he sent me his cattle without seeing my land or meeting me in person. And we did business together for heck, a couple of years at least. And I every month I'd send him an invoice and just and I'd keep him posted on his animals. I'd send him pictures every now and then. And so it worked out. It got me into farming. I didn't have to own the land. I didn't have to own the cattle. But the one thing that you absolutely have to do is take care of both better than you would take care of your own. Because if there's two things I've learned in custom grazing, basically farming other people's cattle on other people's land, if there's two things I've learned, or really one thing, It's you better have a happy cattle owner and a happy landowner. Because if the cattle owner's not happy with you, you're done. If the landowner's not happy with you, you're done. And so you have to keep them happy. You've got to take good care of their cattle and good care of their land. I got into that, and then I decided that I wanted to. That worked out well. At one time, I probably had, I don't know, 50 or 60 head of cattle, and I even had about 30 horses from a couple. They kind of did rescues. They had a horse farm, and they needed somewhere for them to go, so I took care of them. It was really just a bunch of wild horses. They weren't wild, but I didn't have to stall them or anything.
Yeah.
And so that was in the heyday of me doing it. And then I got out of that. I kept doing the leased land, but then I wanted to do my own cattle. And so, occasionally I would have a business partner in that with me. It wasn't always, I don't want anyone to think that it was always just my money, because that's not the case. I'll tell you this though, most of the time, 90% of the time, it was always just my labor. And that was fine. I love farming. And so that's where my heart is. And that got me into just selling cattle. Like I had cattle, I'd buy some, I might, get them to a certain weight and sell them. And then hear me out here. In October of 2019, sometime around then, it was before COVID hit, I had this epiphany. Cattle that are sold at an auction are sold by a farmer or a rancher, whatever you want to call them. They're sold by a farmer to a farmer. And I thought, that I could see that could make sense sometimes, but not most of the time. And most of the time, that's what happens. A cattle farmer is selling his cattle to another cattle farmer. And at some point, you got to sell it to me and you to eat. And you never know what you're going to get at the auction. Half the people may not be paying attention at the time your animal comes up, and some dude gets a slamming deal on your cow and you get hosed. You just never know what you're going to get. And so I looked at my wife and I said, this is like Chick-fil-A selling chicken sandwiches to Popeyes. At some point, you got to sell them to the customer.
Yeah.
And so at that moment, we quit selling live cattle and started processing them and selling beef. And I'll tell you right now that it took a little bit. It took me a couple years, but I didn't have anybody else to help me. Nobody else was selling beef like I wanted to sell beef, by the package, not by the half, whole, or quarter.
Yeah.
And so it took me a couple years to really understand what I was doing. But there's money in it. There's absolutely money in raising your cattle and selling beef. Matter of fact, there's really only, in my opinion and through my experience, there's only two ways to make money in the cattle business. Either sell pot loads or sell beef. You either need to be selling 50,000 pounds of cattle at a time, or you need to be selling beef. And so that's what we do. We sell beef. Now we have outgrown, man, I'm just rambling on. You stop me at any moment. A couple years ago, we realized we didn't have enough land, even the leased land. We didn't have enough to grow the cattle we needed for our sales. Our sales had grown. They had outgrown our ability to grow the beef. So I sent a newsletter to my customers and I basically said, I'm not going to be the one raising the cattle anymore. So I have a guy in Batesville. His name's Jonathan. I met him through the Farrow Cattle Company, Kit Farrow out of Colorado. And I got with Jonathan. Jonathan believes and farms the same way I do. And so I said, Jonathan's going to raise the cattle now. I'm not going to raise them. I'll raise the chicken. And we just kept on rolling. He's got 400 acres and 100 head of cattle. And so that's where I get my cattle. And sometimes, heck, Dirk, sometimes I don't even get them. He'll take them straight to the processor for me, or I'll pick them up from his place and go straight to the processor. They no longer come back to my place. Yeah. Only cows I have at my place are dairy cattle. They're Dexters and they're for milk.
Yeah. So fill me in a little bit and fill the listeners in a little bit on the chicken side of things, because I know you've got a big flock of egg layers. You also do meat birds, pastured poultry. So fill us in a little bit on on that. Where are you doing that? Is that on lease land near your current home right now? And when did you start adding that as an enterprise to the whole farm operation?
Ooh, I don't know exactly when I started adding that to the basically the cattle. Uh, I don't remember. I do. I kind of know it was so Greg Judy over the years turned me on to Joe Salatin, and then I started reading Joel's books, and I thought, well, I could grow meat birds, you know.
Yeah,
And
I
so I
love
started growing meat birds. Yeah, yeah, he's got a lot of excellent ideas. And let me say this for anybody who reads their stuff or follows those guys, don't go into it thinking that you need to either agree with or do things the same way they do. I don't.
yeah,
I don't agree with everything they do. I'm not going to say they're wrong because I don't necessarily think that I'm right and they're wrong in certain cases, but what works for them doesn't always work for the reader. What works for Joe doesn't always work for Nick.
yeah.
What works for Greg doesn't always work for Nick. And also another thing to keep in mind, this is something that I was reminded of just today. So I've been reading the book Carnivore Diet by Paul Saladino, okay? And I
Yeah.
have a buddy who listens to Paul's podcast and I've been reading the book. I haven't made it into the podcast yet. Well, there was a portion of the book where Paul's like, you don't necessarily need to be drinking a lot of milk, even if it's raw milk, even if it's A2 raw milk. And I thought, well, I'll do quite a bit of the other stuff that you say, but I'm drinking my raw milk, you know? So
Yeah.
I called my buddy up and I said, hey, uh, I don't know how long ago he wrote that book, The Carnivore Diet, but I called my buddy up who listens to Paul quite a bit. And my buddy said, yeah, he's done more research and he has a different way of thinking on the raw milk now than he did when he wrote the book. And that's something that we need to keep in mind because even Greg Judy, like I know now, Greg Judy doesn't do things exactly how he did 10, 15 years ago when he wrote the books. And you can't blame the guy for making changes. You ought to blame him if he never makes changes.
Yeah.
You know, you got to have an open mind and be a visionary. And so there are things that are going to change, and you can read those books now and think, well, that doesn't make very much sense. Well, it may have made sense then, and it doesn't now. And Greg probably aware of that, probably preaches that. So those books really helped me understand the direction I wanted to go in my farm.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I mean, I think that's the beauty of it is if your systems aren't growing and changing and evolving, I mean, I think most people's are. I mean, even my farm mentor, more which he's more on the market garden side of growing produce. I mean, from last year to this year, it's like he's changing systems, he's trying new things. So the way he did something last year is completely different now. In certain ways, not everything. So I mean,
Yeah,
I think most farmers should be evolving their systems. And you're right. If it's the exact same 15 years later, it's like, you know,
that's
um,
right. Research should never end.
yeah,
And if it doesn't ever end, then you should expect stuff to change. And so I know I used to get, I guess the reason I'm telling you that is I used to get irritated with Greg because I thought, man, that ain't what you told me to do. And then it kind of hit me. Like I learned somehow or another, it's okay for him to change.
yeah,
Matter of fact, it's good for him to change. And so don't be mad at him just because he changed his. I mean, heck, there's things that like there's people I didn't used to like, and then now I like them. Is that wrong? No, it's probably a good thing.
yeah,
It's good to have a vision. And
for sure. Fill me in a little bit. So that this is just so for someone wanting to get into farming, um, let's just say, hey, they want to start. Uh, Maybe they just want to start kind of small. They want to do maybe some pastured poultry, um, maybe some milk cows, maybe the market garden side, which I do obviously more on the vegetable and egg side. I don't ranch as much like you do, which is why I wanted to have you on. Like, what would your advice be to that type of person that's just like, I want to just get started and dive into this? What would be your kind of first piece of advice, and where would you kind of push them or encourage them to start in regards to enterprises?
okay, so that reminds me that I didn't really answer your question about the meat birds. Joe Salatin's got a couple books on making money on meat birds, basically farming meat birds, and that's really what got me started on it. And that's where I would recommend people go. For one, when people ask me kind of what you just did, when they're like, "Hey, what if I wanted to get into farming?" if they're not interested in reading, they kind of lose me. It's like you know, you kind of lost me. So I once heard an author, I don't remember who it was. A guy said, "Hey," he was talking to the author, and he said, "Can I sit down with you? I got some questions to ask you." Blah blah blah. And the author said, "I tell you what, here's my book. You can read my book." And the guy who was asking for a meeting was kind of insulted because he kind of got like, just read my book. And the author said, the reason I did that is because I put all this time and energy into putting the answers to that book, answers to your questions in that book, and you don't want to take the time to read that book or buy that book, but you want to take my time to ask me the questions that I've already put the answers to in that book. And so when people ask me about farming, that's exactly how I feel. Like, okay, look, I will absolutely help somebody get rolling farming if you're willing to read, because that's what I did. And what you're asking me to do is to tell you all the stuff that I took the time to read, like how I learned about certain things. And I have a bookshelf full of books in there that I've read over and over and over again. And you're not wanting to do that. I'm not interested in helping you. So the first thing I'm going to say is, okay, I have a couple books for you to read. Here's this one. Here's this one. As you read them, you're going to have questions, and then we can get started on, you know, your next step. If you're not interested in reading, Dirk, you're not getting much out of them.
Yep, I agree with that, man.
How bad do you want it? I wanted it bad. And I read those books like it was nobody's business.
And that's what you have to do, I think, to really be successful at something and to learn it. You've got to dive in head first. You got to read everything out there, and everybody's going to have different opinions as well, which that's the beauty of it. But if you're not willing to do that, I'm with you. It's like,
Yeah.
I
You're
mean,
not going to shortcut it. I didn't shortcut it, and you're not getting a shortcut effort from me. You're either going to get all my effort or none at all.
yeah.
And why do you have a Bar 3 branded shirt and I don't?
Well, we got a ton of their beef in our store. I don't know if you knew that. All the beef in our farm store at least is theirs.
I'm calling them when we get done here.
Uh,
Yeah. So Branch and I have been, matter of fact, I met Branch the same exact way that I met Jonathan in Batesville. I met Branch through Kit Farrow out of Colorado because Branch is a PCC. It's kind of a different subject, but Branch is a PCC farmer. He was. He may change things up now, and so he and I became buddies. And matter of fact, we bounce stuff off each other occasionally about selling beef. And I want to say he was selling beef before I was. I think he was.
yeah, they do a good job with with their product. I know they're pretty. I know he's very stringent on his system and what pasture those cows get finished on. I mean, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. Uh, he plays by the rules. I
Yeah,
like him. I do. He plays by the now. You are never gonna wonder where Branch stands.
yeah,
So he's gonna tell you.
yeah. So for
I gotta call
somebody,
him. I need a shirt.
so for someone, so after that, they're willing to read and they're willing to come back. Say, I've read these three books. Here's my questions. Let's chat. Kind of what would be your next piece of advice for someone that just wants to get going?
So it depends on their land situation. For one, you don't have to have land to be a farmer. I proved that. I live on 3.5 acres. You just got to find some land to lease. Now, one thing we didn't talk about, and we can talk about this later, is I no longer lease land. I'm not saying that I never will again. I don't right now. And so I've cut my farming operation way back. So I would say, okay, let's talk about the land that you have or land that you have access to. And if worst case scenario, they say, well, I live in a neighborhood and all my family lives in Wyoming. And so I'm down here for work or whatever, but I want to get started farming somehow or another. I would say, okay, then do you know any local farmers? And, if they don't, well, we can find some, that's for sure. And then what you could do is you can go to that local farmer. You could go to a cattleman's meeting because they have those in almost every county in every state. And so you could go to a cattleman's meeting and you could meet farmers there and you could just tell somebody, because I promise you, there are farmers out there right now who are just yearning for somebody. And I'm not going to, I want to say young, and I don't necessarily mean young, but they're yearning for somebody that's not a farmer. That's how we're going to word this. Somebody that's not a farmer to become a farmer. And so if you were to find somebody and say, hey, you got a farm, I live in a neighborhood, I want to help because I want to learn because I think that I have aspirations to farm. I don't know that, but I can tell you this: it's not going to cost you anything to let me find out because I'm going to work for free. I can't work for you every day. Heck, I may not can work for you every weekend, but I can work for you some, and you don't have to pay me anything. I just want to be around it. I want to know that this is something that I want to do, and in the process, you're going to get free labor out of it.
Yeah. I mean, that's if someone came to me and like teach me how to run a market farm.
I'd hang up with you right now because I got work to do with them. They'll be like, "What, you want to help?" Hey, Dirk, I got to go, man. I got to help. Yeah,
But I mean, I think that's it. I think that a lot of, as you said, I mean, there's something enjoyable too about being able to teach other people and invest in other people that want to learn the industry that you're in, whether that's farming or any other industry. But it's at the same time, yeah, you got to show up. You got to be willing to say, hey, I'm willing to work some for nothing to be able to learn
yeah.
and trade my time for knowledge. And I'm with you. I mean, I did the same thing when I got into small scale vegetable farming. I mean, I reached out to an urban farm and I was like, hey, and this is when I lived in Colorado and I was just kind of learning about it. And did the same thing. I was like, I just want to come see your operation. I'll work and just it'd be an opportunity for me to learn. But it's great advice because there's just a lot you can gain from that.
There is, and there's a lot of opportunities for that because people they need help. And one thing that I did, so the gentleman who gave me the beef magazine, that's kind of what I did. I didn't really know him. I knew of him. I mean, this dude was in his 80s. This was 10 years ago. And so I was, I was probably, let's just say 33, 34 years old. And he was in his 80s, still farming. And I think I would just call him maybe and talk with him. And then and I'll tell you what I learned. Not only did he appreciate me helping him some, but he appreciated the company and he appreciated the fact that I thought I wanted to be a farmer. And I think he's passed on now. He would probably be pretty proud of where he helped me to get, and it didn't cost him anything. I just called him up. As a matter of fact, I think we probably talked on the phone 3 or 4 times before I ever met him. And then I went out to his farm and I would help him. And I even told him here's something that they could do if they wanted to get into farming. Here's something they could do if they found somebody willing to let them work for free. If you ever run into a bind, 8 o'clock at night, and you got to go do something when you got to pull a calf or whatever it is you got to do, and you could use an extra set of hands, you can call me. If I'm available, I'm going to come out and I'm going to help you out. And I'll tell you, I had told that to uh, Don, the older gentleman that I'm talking about. I had told him just that. Kelly and we're eating somewhere. It's later in the evening. I remember it being dark outside. We were eating, and I get a phone call, and it was Don. And I answered it. He said, "Hey, you busy?" And I said no because I just didn't want him to think I couldn't talk to him. I'm not busy. I'm at dinner with my wife, but I didn't tell him that. And he said, "Well, I got a cow down with a stuck calf." And I said, "I'm headed your way." And so hung up, told Kelly, we got our meal or whatever we were doing, and uh, we came home. Matter of fact, Dirk, we were in Little Rock. Dawn lived down Highway 70 going to Hot Springs. So we weren't really close. We were probably, a straight shot. We might have been 40 minutes away.
Yeah.
I still needed to come home and change. So we ran by the house. I changed my clothes and I got over there and I was able to help him pull that calf. And so I provided some value to him in return for a very good education.
Yeah.
Just by telling him, hey, if you're ever in a bind, you call me.
Yeah. 100%.
And sometimes you have to, it may not be ideal. You might be eating dinner with your wife, but and I'm not saying you got to do this every time, but they need to know, wow, he was here within no time.
Yeah.
He never knew we were out eating. Sometimes you just got to make a sacrifice. Do you want to learn? Do you want to make a good impression on the guy that's giving you an education? Then drop what you're doing and go help him pull a calf.
Yeah, 100%. And you got to have a do what it takes mentality when
You
when you're
do.
learning and when you're starting a business. And that's kind of where I wanted to segue into, because you talk a lot on your content, or you talk some of just about the business side of things, and I do some of the similar stuff because I think there's not a lot out there where people actually talk about numbers. They talk business of how do you actually run this like a business, and so from your perspective, and obviously I know everybody's got different opinions. Someone wants to start out farming. Let's just take a hypothetical situation of someone wants, maybe they'll start with pastured poultry, because I think that and laying hens is probably one of the easier points of entry, at least from my perspective. Would you agree that that's probably easier to start with than cattle or sheep, for example?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's say they want to start with that. Maybe they have limited startup capital. Just kind of what's your perspective on, hey, I want to get going, but I don't have a lot of money to put into this. I'm busy. Um, you know, yeah, just fill us in on your perspective from that standpoint.
Okay. So first off, what gets measured gets managed. So before you ever buy anything, you need to to find out what it would cost for you to get started. So, well, I don't know how many birds I would buy. It doesn't really matter how many you would buy. What matters, and I've actually told people this before, so I could probably recite it. You start backwards. So let's just say we were going to do meat birds. So you start backwards. Okay. Well, what's that mean? Well, uh, how many meat birds can you hold at 7, 8 weeks old? I don't know. Maybe let's just say I could hold 100. Okay. Well, how many baby chicks could you hold in your brooder? Oh, well, I can't hold that. I might could hold 25 or 30. Okay. Well, then your 100 7 or 8 week olds doesn't matter anymore because your brooder can only hold, let's just say 30. So you're not at 100 anymore. You're at 30. Okay. So if your brooder can hold 30, how many, how much do those birds cost you each? Well, let's just say hypothetically, those birds are going to cost you $100. Well, I don't have 100 that I could, this is a hypothetical. Keep that in mind. I don't have 100 I could spend on birds, but I definitely have 50 that I could spend on birds. And then I need some money for feed. I got everything else set up, whatever. Okay, good. So you can't afford 30 birds. You're at 15 now. You're going to buy 15 because you only got $50 to spend on them. So you're working your way backwards. Initially, you're like, well, I had room for 100. Yeah, but you ain't got all the other stuff for 100. So work your way backwards. You get to a point where you're like, okay, so actually, maybe you even go the other direction. So let's just say, let's back up a little bit, Dirk. Let's say, well, I can hold 100 birds out here. Okay. Uh, maybe you say you could hold 200 birds. So then you're going to back into the 200 bird thing. Well, how many does it take for you to, how many birds do you have to buy to have 200 at the end, Dirk? Have you ever raised meat birds before? Because them
I
dudes
have,
are
but I
looking for a
haven't done
place
the
to die.
hardcore math on
Yeah.
it.
So you just need to back into it. So, you know, how much room do you have for 7 to 8 week old birds?
Yeah.
How much room do you have in your brooder? You know, how much money do you have to start with? Can I start off buying, 100 birds? Maybe not. I got room for, 15 or 20 in my, which is perfectly fine to start that way. You know, a lot of people think that you got to start big. You don't ever have to start big.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, nobody ever starts big. So just start small. And one thing that Joel told me through his books, through reading his books, was marketing. I think I'm probably changing courses on you here, but this is important because what you would eventually back into is how many birds could you sell? Well, I don't necessarily know how many I sell. Okay, well, let me ask you a more important question. How many of those meat birds, once processed, could you give away?
Yeah.
Well, that changed. What do you mean give away? And here's what Joel taught me. Marketing is pretty much any way you can get the word out. It's not just a billboard. It's not just a business card. Matter of fact, Have you ever been to Chick-fil-A with one of them little free chicken sandwich cards?
Oh yeah.
Dude, they give them out like candy.
Yep.
Do you know what that is? You know what that is? That's marketing.
Yep.
They are essentially, now, hang with me here. Chick-fil-A is giving away food to sell more food. So how many birds can you give away to future potential customers? That's marketing. And it takes marketing to grow your customer base, whether it be a social media video. Well, I don't like being on videos. Okay, well, that's no problem. There are other ways to do it. So Joel taught me, Nick, don't hesitate to give away some chicken. You give it to people who you think might be a customer. If they like it, they'll buy from you.
Yep.
And he was right. I can't raise enough birds. But I
Yep.
did. I started off giving it away. Same thing with eggs. If you ever have too many eggs, don't hesitate to give them away to potential customers. You're not giving them away. I'm wondering if I should bite my tongue here. You're not, you don't give away your product to people who will never buy your product.
Yes, correct.
Okay, you give
I
away
agree.
your product to potential customers.
Yep.
So if you have too many, what am I going to do with all these eggs? You're going to use them for marketing. That's exactly what you're going to do.
Yep.
And Joel talks a little bit about that in his book. So don't, if you're starting off like this, that's one way that you could build your customer base, because you have to market. But again, if you don't have a lot of money to get into it, you might have to be careful with how much of that you give away,
Hmm.
because you got to recoup some money. So, you just got to be careful. You got to watch your money from the beginning. You do though, you figure out how many birds can I afford? How many birds can I afford to feed? How many birds can I afford to process? And then you decide, do I have the money to do that?
Yeah, because I think for people that have never raised chickens, there's until the for example, for you, until you sell that bird, you've got a pretty heavy infrastructure or a pretty heavy capital investment into those chickens, mainly due to uh, your labor and your feed costs before you actually turn around and make your money on it. Which obviously chickens, they need a good amount of feed, so you've got a lot of money
Yeah.
tied up in feed. Am I correct?
Yeah, you're correct. Yeah, you pay you pay $3. I don't know what you pay for the meat birds now. It depends on how many you buy, but let's just say you paid $2 per bird and you were going to do 50. Well, you're right off the bat, you're out $100 until the end. And you got to wait 8 weeks. That's one. And 8 weeks isn't a long time unless you're waiting on money, and then it's like that's a long time.
Yeah.
But that's too many people go into business, any business, thinking they're going to make it overnight. Look, I can go by. I have a knack for this. Are you ready? This is kind of a weird knack. I can drive by a a business that's new, just opened. They got their sign put up. I can drive by it and tell you the chances that it's going to be there in 2 months. And you see it close in 2 months. And my thinking is, were you expecting to make it overnight? I mean, even
Yeah.
Joel will tell you you can't depend on it. Like, you don't necessarily have to have 6 months of savings unless you're diving off of everything into that business, but you or 2 years of savings, whatever it is. But you need to know that that doesn't happen overnight. Gary V. I'm sure you've listened to Gary V. before, and he he has given me the best advice that I may have ever heard. There are two things you need to be as a business owner: patient and ambitious. You need to be patient and you need to be ambitious. You need to be ambitious in working hard every day to obtain your goals, to make your business work. And you need to be patient in knowing that it's not going to happen overnight. It ain't going to happen in a month or in 2 months. You've got to know that going in, or you're going to be very disappointed.
Yeah.
And your sign's going to come down, and people are going to look at that empty space that you thought you needed to rent, and they're going to just know that you went out of business
Well, I think
because you thought it would change overnight.
it's a good point. I mean, we live in such an instant culture, and it's like, when it comes to building a farm business or any business, really, it's like it takes years, and you've got to reinvest, you've got to reinvest in that business, or you've got to upfront invest a lot of capital into your business. So it just takes time. I mean, I relate with that tremendously. I mean, on our farm, I'm like, we're just technically kind of going into our third year, kind of 2.5 years in. We started in mid-season, and it's like really every bit of profit that I make, I need to put it back into the business and keep growing it. Um, and I
People will
think,
ask you, they'll say, well, how are you going to do that, Dirk? How are you going to take your profit? You need that profit. How are you going to take that profit and throw it back into your business? I can tell you how, because I did this when I had an insurance agency. I actually just sold it in December.
oh,
And
did you
I
really?
know when I did what?
I said, congrats. And I'm glad you're bringing this up real quick because I want to talk about this, about the farming piece of how can you reinvest all that capital or that profit into your business. And I want to talk about this, and that's other income streams, but go ahead with what you're saying.
Yeah, so when I started that insurance agency, for one, my wife deserves as much credit for the success of that insurance agency as what I would get, because she brought in most of the money when I was starting that agency. Yes, like it was my agency. She had nothing to do with the actual operation, but everything to do with the fact that it made it. And here's why. An insurance agent, like I made $1,800. I made maybe $1,800 in the first, I don't know how many months. Like, I mean, nothing, right? But how did I? But I had, you got to invest, just like with your farm. You got to invest. You got to invest in some marketing, maybe some business cards, maybe a computer, maybe filing, whatever it is. You've got to invest. Well, how did I do that? I'll tell you. I cleaned offices at night. I had a part-time job to help me make my full-time job. And so, and most small business owners have. You ask them, well, how did you make it at first? Well, this wasn't I wasn't dependent upon this to pay my bills. I
Yeah.
worked later. I had another job in the evening or on the weekend or whatever. And I remember there were times, Dirk, where I thought, am I ever going to not have to work two jobs? I can tell you now, I don't have to work two jobs. But for years, I had to work. I clean those offices, man. I'd get home, my boys would be asleep. But I'm not saying that you need to miss out on your kids' lives, and I didn't miss out on my kids' lives because I didn't have to clean offices every single night, but I had to clean offices.
Yeah.
There is no room for shame in growing a small business. You got to be shameless, you got to be humble and patient and ambitious.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a good point of, I think especially when you're starting out, I think sometimes people, and I'm the same way, like I'm such an all in kind of person with everything I do, which there's good and bad that comes with that. Um, but at the same time, when you're starting that farm business, man, there's just so many things I think that you can't foresee, and jumping full fledged in, and that being your sole income stream, it just, which is fine if like you're set up financially where it doesn't matter, you don't have to rely on that income. But it's just, to me, I think having other income streams that can help you transition to where you maybe eventually you can be farming full time. I feel like is a much better route than like, hey, I'm just gonna go head first into this. And some people are that way, but it's just it has its pros and a lot of cons to it. Just because you got to reinvest so much of that money.
Yep,
Um,
you do, especially in a farm. There's when you start farming, when you start pushing your farm to be a business, you need things to make that business run. You need things so that things will work on your farm. You got to have certain things. It's going to take money to do that. You don't need to go out and buy it all up front. I was having a conversation with a guy today, and this is pretty important because this is exactly what farmers do. I was having a conversation with a guy today who was talking about becoming a hot shot truck driver, which is just a regular pickup truck pulling a gooseneck trailer or even a bumper pull trailer. And he said, hey, do you think I need to trade my truck in and get a bigger truck to do the hot shot thing? And I said, no, not at first. I said, that's what people do. And they end up behind the eight ball because they think at the very beginning, you need to go spend all this money. What happens if you get into hot shotting and then you realize it's not for you, but you done went and turned your F-250 in for a Dodge Ram that's twice as expensive, And then now you have this Dodge Ram, and you're not even hot shot anymore because you just went all in from the beginning. Start with what you have and upgrade as needed. Too
Yep.
many times we think we got it, and I did it. That's one thing that I haven't told people just a whole lot is when I first started farming, I was your traditional farmer, Dirk, and I was an idiot. I thought we needed a flatbed. I thought we needed a gooseneck trailer. I thought we needed all this stuff. And then I read that's when I read how to not go broke ranching, and I thought, well, I'm in the go broke ranching boat,
Mhm.
and I'm fortunate that I caught it in time, in enough time to right the wrong. We do it all the time. It's just like even starting an insurance agency. I started my insurance agency from my bedroom. I wanted an office. I wanted to go pay rent somewhere. That was just not good thinking. It's like, okay, I'm going to get an insurance agency. I'm going to start this insurance agency. What's the first thing I need to do? I need to go buy a building.
Yeah.
You don't. You
I know
don't.
that's the truth that because especially in market gardening, I mean and I know the same thing in ranching or raising chickens or whatever. I mean, there's so many tools and gadgets and things where it's just like, man, you could spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, shoot, I could spend 300 grand right now. I mean, I could a trick that
Absolutely.
like all these things, but the question, you know, that you always have to ask and is just like, well, for one, can I afford it? Can the business afford it? Do I have the money to do it? But is it going to make me? Is it going to make me more money? Is it going to help the business grow, or is this just something I want? You know,
Yeah.
um, and it's a tough place. I mean, like for instance, like our farm store, and I've learned a little bit of the similar lesson of like when we opened our farm store, we borrowed the money for it, and now I've paid, we've since paid that off. But man, I felt a heavy load on my chest from having that debt of like now I've got to not only make this work, now I've got to pay this money back. And that was it was a lesson learned, and I'm not anti borrowing some money sometimes, but you just got to be really careful with it.
That's
Um,
it. Hey, that's right. That's right. I'm not anti, but you've got to be careful.
yeah, it's
So
definitely
let me
pretty slow.
I want to tell you about an instance of exactly what you and I are talking about, and this applies to anybody going into business. I have two friends. They don't even know each other. They both do the same thing. They, I'll just tell you, they both bake. They bake cookies, they bake other stuff, but they bake basically. One of them had an excellent social media following. I mean, an excellent social media following. She was phenomenal at marketing. And she thought, well, I think I need to get me a storefront. And she got a storefront, and you go in there, and it's like there were bakers in there working. There was stuff everywhere. They just had an awesome operation going on, making cookies left and right. And then I have this friend who is a one woman show, making cookies in her kitchen. And only one of them is in business today because the other one couldn't keep up with the debt.
Yep.
She couldn't keep up with the expenses that she had piled on. So you have to ask yourself, am I willing to take that risk? I would drive by that storefront and I would see that it was closed. The sign was still up there. It's closed. We know something happened. Everybody sees it. And now it's like your social media is gone. Like all that you built up, it's gone. And here's this other person who's just working from their kitchen at home who doesn't have that burden that you just mentioned. Now, I'm like you. I agree. There are times where you might need to borrow a little money. You got to be very careful with that. But we had two different people doing the same thing. One of them looked glamorous. The other one looked kind of lame, if you will, making cookies in your kitchen. But at the end of the day, there's only one of them still making cookies
Yep.
in her kitchen, thriving, selling cookies left and right. And she could probably take on more customers by having a storefront, but not enough to pay for it.
Yeah.
Less is more.
Yeah, I think it just goes to show you that growing slower, being patient, and this is something I'm preaching to myself here. As a young, ambitious, entrepreneur business owner, like I want to grow fast, and but that temptation of, okay, well, let's go borrow this money and blow it out, and um, there's a reason older folks would tell you to approach that with caution,
Hmm.
uh, because either they've lived it or they know other people that they've seen it end badly. But the other part you don't see is that person that's just making it in their house. They don't have They don't have the employees to pay. They don't have the stress of everything. I mean, you got to look at that too. Just the quality of life, the difference there.
Yeah, for sure. They
Um,
don't have that burden that you had, that you talked about, because a lot of people have that. I've had that before. It is no fun.
yeah,
You start wondering. And then the other side of this is uh, you see businesses that look like they are just thriving. They got 15 trucks on the road. They're doing this and that and making deliveries or doing mowing all those yards. Let's just say like a landscaping business. You see their trucks everywhere. Their gross profit is, let's just say, $2 million. And
yeah,
then you got this guy over here with a little Ford Ranger and a rake and a blower and maybe a push mower in the back of his truck. Okay. And he's busy every day of the week, and he's netting, uh, let's just say he's netting $50,000. But you got that big business over there, their gross profit is $2 million and they're netting 15,000. And people don't see that.
yeah,
All they see is all the trucks, and you're netting or you're grossing $2 million. I am, and I'm spending almost every penny of it in expenses,
yeah.
because bigger is not necessarily better.
There's a book called Company of One. I read it probably several years ago, and it's just on that subject, of smaller's better. And yeah, I'm with you, man. I mean, and that's my frustration too, especially in farming. Like, people love the clickbait of gross numbers, like, with market gardens, for example. Like, oh, this market garden, they sell $500,000 in produce. It's like, okay, can we see their spreadsheet? Can we see their what
Yeah,
their
that's right.
for profits?
So here's something people don't know. Three years ago, Dirk. 3 years ago, I was processing 6 cows a month. 6 a month. Like we did. Okay, so a 3 year stretch. We did 30 something one year. We did 40 something one year, and we did 52. It was 52 in the third year. We had got to a point where we were sending 6 cows a month to the processor. We were selling some beef for way under what it was costing us to produce it,
And were y'all selling that direct to the consumer?
just direct. But did you hear what I said? For way under what it was costing us to produce it. And so when I found that out, I was $40,000 in debt. And I thought, how do you miss that? Which is why you hear me preach time and time again about paying attention to your numbers, because it did that to me because I didn't pay attention to my numbers. Yeah, I'm doing 6 a month, man. People are like, "Whoa, you're awesome."
Yeah.
I'm $40,000 in debt because I was so awesome,
So is
and you
that
start.
when you were in the 40 grand in debt? Was that when you kind of fell into the trap? Like, I got to have all the flatbed.
No,
Okay, so that
no,
was after.
is after that. Yeah. So I had got out of the point of thinking I needed all this equipment. And then I'm in this, you're processing these cows, and I'm not really paying attention to, like, I'm selling, like I was selling ground beef for $4 and $5 a pound. This is, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And it was flying out the door. 6 cows a month, Dirk.
It's a
Like,
lot.
who does that? What small farmer does that? Like, that's a lot. And man, I thought I was king. And then one day I sat down and I had known, you ever get this? So I'm a Christian, and I believe that the Holy Spirit talks to me and will give me advice on, or give me direction on anything I'm dealing with. And I just kept feeling this inner voice say, you got to run your numbers, Gann. Got to run your numbers, Gann. And I ignored it. And I finally sat down one day in November of 2020, 21, November 21, maybe 22. Uh, I don't remember when it was. There. Anyway, it was November. I remember that a couple years ago. I sat down. I did my numbers, and I remember getting my wife like I was probably in tears, and I told her if that's the best we can do, we're done. We're not selling anything else because we were. That's when I realized we were $40,000 in debt because I hadn't been paying attention to what I was selling beef for. I was just selling it for the price I thought I needed to sell it for.
Yeah.
Come to find out, the cow and the processing cost me more than I was making off of the beef I was selling. Like, what idiot allows that to happen? You're looking at him. And so that's why I preach through my videos to pay attention to your numbers. And so I think that night, Dirk, I typed up a letter and sent it out to every customer I had. And I'm going to paraphrase here, but I told them that uh, this is what I've done. This is kind of the position I put myself in, and I appreciate your support. You're going to see a change in our prices, and it's either that or I have to quit.
Yeah.
And I sent that out, and I raised my prices immediately, and I processed less cows. So now we don't even heck, we probably need to be processing 2 a month, maybe 3, or maybe back up to 3. Our prices have practically doubled, and we're making more money. Like our gross income is so much better than our net income. I'm sorry, our net income is so much better now, and we're doing half the work.
Yeah. You're working less.
We're working less, and our price is right, and there's profit there. And I just wasn't paying attention. And you got to pay attention.
Yeah.
Bigger is not better. More is not always better.
It's a great lesson because I think that in our culture, just in general, even with farms, the big farms and the big businesses, they're glamorous and they're worshipped from the outside. And I think people feel pressure like I gotta get big and you know, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that come with getting bigger fast. And I'm not against having a huge farm. Like if you have the market for it and you want to get like go for it. But at the same time, I think it's kind of a lie that can be bought. And what if you stay small and you enjoy it and you have a low stress load and you still get to spend time with your family or work on other businesses or other projects and you're happy and you have and I know Gary Vee talks a lot about this because he pushes it back against like everybody. He's like, everybody wants to go make $1 million, but what if you just made, let's say you made $150,000 a year as a family or whatever, but you're happy and you enjoy your life and you're making a difference in the world. That's a huge win. But we don't look at those, and those small wins from those type of people aren't really. It's not celebrated.
And he'll tell you, he said, I have billionaire friends that are depressed. And
Yeah,
he said, I have friends who are making $80,000 a year who couldn't be happier.
yeah,
And not even 80. That's probably, I should have said 80. There are people out there who are making peanuts in comparison to that, and they're happy.
yeah,
You know, one thing that we don't do when we're looking at our money is we don't think about the expenses that we should get rid of. We just think, oh, I need to make more money. Well, you can if you spend less. Uh, give me a second here. Kit Farrow says, and you've heard me say this in my videos before, the easiest money you'll ever make is the money you don't spend and you've already paid taxes on
it's a great word. It's a great word, though. I mean,
it. It is. So I'm strict with it. And it probably because of some of the stuff I've been through that I caused myself. It's one thing uh, you go through these tough times and you want to blame everything. And you've heard this before. Sometimes people will blame God for some stupid decision they made, or they'll blame whoever. Well, these customers just don't want to buy my product. I've caught myself saying that. But then I quickly realized that there's only one person to blame for the situation that I'm in, and that's me. Your marketing may not be good enough. Nick, are you working hard to sell more product? Are you charging too much? Like you have to self-evaluate. I think Gary Vee says self-deprecate, maybe like you got to self-deprecate, and don't be afraid to let people know. It's helpful that people realize that you're not perfect and you hear this too. Listen, so you see these folks on social media talking about, well, the algorithm doesn't really care, like it's like the algorithm doesn't like me, or I'm being shadow banned by
Yeah.
TikTok now, and I do that. I hear that, and I think you're an idiot, and I probably shouldn't say that because sometimes you may feel that way, but
Oh, I feel
we're
very sure.
friends. We're friends, so I can call it. If it does that to you, let me just tell you something. When I have a video that doesn't do very good, and you see these people, like my videos, like the algorithm doesn't really care for me. I get like 250 views every video. Listen, it's not the algorithm.
It's your videos.
You that's right. You probably have really good content and really bad presentation, or you have good presentation but your content's terrible. Quit blaming other people and take a look in the mirror. And I do that when I have a video that doesn't do real good. Like I just think, okay, well, next time do a better job with your video.
Yeah.
I don't ever blame the algorithm. I don't ever say I'm being shadow banned. I don't blame my customers. I don't. I look at me and think, what is it that you can do better?
I agree. Oh, I'm with you on the social media stuff. I'm like, that video didn't do good. It's like, here's why. Kind of going blank on his name. He's a big YouTube guy. Dare Leaves. One of the well, I'd say he's like the when it comes to YouTube. I mean, he's like the OG. And he says it all the time. He's like, you're gonna have to humble yourself for what I'm gonna say here, but it's not the algorithm. It's your content.
That's
And
right.
quit blaming the algorithm. It's you. It's you. Like you said, look in the mirror.
That's
Um,
right. It's
that's just
something about your content, something about what you're doing just needs improved. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean you're terrible. It doesn't mean that you don't need to be doing videos. You just need to. I mean, heck, if you sit down, you go to the free throw line, you shoot 10 free throws, and you make one. Don't blame the goal.
yeah,
Blame the shooter.
100%. What's the as we start to kind of land the plane here? What's kind of the future? What's your future vision for your farm? What does that look like? For you in this season of your life.
It's liquid white.
Okay.
It's raw. It's raw milk. It's A2 raw milk. I'll continue to sell beef as long as I have a source like Jonathan. I will continue to sell beef. Uh, I have layers. I only have 50 now. I used to have a couple hundred. I've cut that back. Uh, I probably only have like the main reason I have layers now is because I want those eggs. Like I want them for me, and then I'll sell whatever I don't need. But beef, and then I'm working towards more and more raw milk. So let's back up just a little bit. But, you know, there are very few people who are selling raw milk. And Arkansas has some really good farmer protection laws when it comes to raw milk. I can sell 600 gallons of raw milk off my farm every month.
Okay.
So I want to continue selling raw milk. Here's where I'm at with it. And this is, I've been farming for a while. I've found ways for my farm to make money. I have found ways for my farm to lose money. Matter of fact, I've got 3 livestock guardian dogs that are sucking the profit out of my farm. Uh, and I don't need them all. I don't need all 3 anymore. And I'm having a hard time parting with them, although I would with the right farm. But uh, I have learned that you need to do market research when you're thinking about what you're going to sell. Well, what does market research mean? Well, you need to know if there's a if there's a raw milk farm, you got 3 of them in your area, you might struggle to sell raw milk. If you are selling beef or if you want to open up a gas station in the middle of Greenbrier, you might struggle. Can you compete with all them others? So you got to do some market research. It doesn't take a lot of money. It may not take any money. And you just figure out, what do I have that will sell? Like what do I like that will sell? Matter of fact, there's a guy who owns, and you've heard of Larry's Pizza before, but Larry and I used to be pretty good friends. I mean, we just don't see each other a lot anymore. But one day he told me, Nick, you need to sell the food that you like to eat because you can sell it a whole lot easier. And so sell what you like, but you got to do market research and make sure that you can sell it in your area. You may not can sell goat meat if you live in an all white community because white people aren't typically eating goat. That's That is a product for that's like opening up a hamburger joint in a town that is majority Hispanic. It might not go so well. Like use your brain there, you know? And so you just got to be careful, do market research. Not a lot of people are selling raw milk, and I love raw milk. And so that's the direction that I want to go right now, Dirk. Here's why here's the reason for that long story. I milk by hand. I need a milker. I've tried a couple milkers from friends and they didn't work the way I wanted them. The milker that I believe will do the job that I want it to do is $2,400. How many gallons of milk do I have to sell? And I'm only selling half gallons right now, and I sell them for $8 a half gallon.
Okay.
How many half gallons do I have to sell to pay for that milker? A lot, a
Yeah.
lot. And so I have really been dragging my feet, and I have the money to buy the milker, but I've been dragging my feet because do I want to spend $2,400? Do you have to do like? Are you ready for that? Do you want to do it right now? You're only milking one cow. I have three. I actually have three, kind of four, kind of five. I know that's weird, but that could be getting milk in the near future. But right now, I only have one. So do you need to spend $2,400? So you got to go into your expenses with a what's it called? Like a not negative mindset, but you got to go in there uh, like you got to be leery about the money you're about to spend. You need to make sure. How many times have you gone to Home Depot to buy something and you get in there and you're like, I got that at home. I can do that. I got that. And then you leave without anything because you realize that you had it all at home. You didn't want to spend the money. So right now I'm torn. Am I ready to spend $2,400 on this milker? I'm just paying attention to my numbers.
So I want to back up because I want to dig into this a lot, a little bit. And I know we're going long here on the podcast, but I think this is good. So, how much do the A2 cows cost, and what are your I know I'm rapid fire question here. What are your big inputs, and how much money how much milk can one cow produce for you?
So milk cows are expensive. I would say a good milk cow is going to cost you at least $2,500.
Okay.
Okay, that milk cow will produce well, and it varies. You know, people are going to get on to me for what I'm about to say, but a $2,500 milk cow better give you at least a gallon a day. And when they don't have a calf on them, they better give you 2, maybe 3 gallons a day. There are milk cows that'll give you 5 or 6 gallons a day, but I think you're probably getting near the end of that spectrum. You know, you have like with me where I might get 2 quarts a day, and then you have some that are going to give you 6. Well, what's the average? I would say 2 gallons a day. All right. So 2 gallons a day, that's going to cost you $2,500 for the cow. And then, I don't know about like expenses. I've built kind of a milk stall up here and it didn't cost me a whole lot, couple $100 for the lumber. I had some of it laying around here. Uh, the cow obviously is going to be your biggest expense or the milker. And I'll tell you, I have a friend who just bought $1,000 milker, and I mean it's okay, it's okay,
Yeah.
but I'm not buying that one. I've tried it.
So
So a milker is expensive.
you have to milk every day?
You do, yep. So it varies. If you have a calf on the cow, you're going to want to separate them at some point. So I like right now I separate. Uh, so hear me out here. This gets a little bit weird. You're going to have questions, but I have a 12-month-old calf still milking for a very intentional reason. I don't have a milker. I cannot drain her by hand. And if you don't drain her, you're not really drain her, but if you don't get the majority of that milk, you're 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 kind of you're basically uh she's going to dry up quicker. I need her to get drained. So I separate the calf from her all the time. I milk around 5 in the evening. As soon as I'm done milking, I put her in with the calf for about 15 minutes and I let that calf finish her off for me.
Yeah.
The reason I do that is because I don't have a milker. If I had a milker, I'd wean that calf already. Matter of fact, the calf should have been weaned already, but I need that calf to help me out right now because if you want milk, you got to keep milking. When you stop milking, the cow will dry up. If you keep milking, her body's like, oh, we need more, so we make more. Oh, they use it, we need to make more. When you stop and you leave the milk in there, the cow. I don't know a lot about this, so I'm just kind of shooting from the hip. When you leave the milk in there, the cow gets to a point where its body realizes I don't need to make any more milk. We got milk, and then it dries up, and the cow's not making milk, so you don't have milk. When I get a milker, I will not put her in with the calf when I'm done. I'll drain her with that milker.
Yeah.
And I'm only milking. My cow does not have a big bag. She's a first calf heifer. I've heard as they have more calves, that bag will grow. Hopefully, you've seen these milk cows, these dairy cattle. It looks like they're carrying 2 gallons underneath them. Mine does not look like that. Yeah,
So long,
but she was not $2,500 either. I bought her and a calf for $1,500. They're registered Dexters, are they? They're registered Dexters, I think. Maybe I don't even know. I think they're registered Dexters. I know the mom is. The calf is A2A2. The mom is not. I felt like my bull is A2A2, so I thought, okay, I'll buy them for 1,500. And I think I paid the right price. Her bag's not huge. She doesn't put out a lot. If she put out a lot, I probably would have, been interested in paying more.
yeah,
Uh, but I got an A2A2 calf out of her and a chance to get more with my A2A2 bull.
yeah. So do you have to feed? Because I'm pretty ignorant when it comes to milk cows. Do you have to? Do you have them just set grazed out on a pasture? Are you feeding them hay? Are you feeding grain? Like how do you work with milk cows? Because I know it's just a whole different game.
Well, you could just do grass only, hay during the winter. A lot of folks who milk, they will feed alfalfa pellets, which I do,
Okay.
especially while they're in the. So I run my cattle through the milk stanchion, even the ones that I'm not milking, because when I do milk them, I want them to be ready. Don't train them later when you can train them now. So
Yeah.
I run them through there just like they're going to be milked, and they get some alfalfa pellets there through the head, through the head gate of the milker. But keep this in mind for my particular situation. My cattle are right up there, and I
Yeah.
only live on 3.5 acres because I'm not interested in leasing land right now. I manually feed hay every day, and then I give the alfalfa pellets when I'm milking.
Yeah. So basically, you've got the milk cows right here on your 3 acres.
That's right. The only one that's not here is the bull, and I keep him at a friend's house a few miles down the road.
And so basically, your quote unquote feed input is hay and alfalfa pellets.
That's right.
And how much hay?
Hay
I
and I,
mean, like how much hay are we talking that you have to actually get through, or is it pretty minimal in the grand scheme of things?
no, it's not minimal at all.
Because I mean, I
I
know
mean,
how much chicken feed costs for chickens. I'm like, it's a big input, for those egg layers.
so,
Like,
yep,
what's it
I
like
buy.
for a milk cow?
Okay, so I feed at least one bale a day, and that's to these three. So I have two 12-month-old heifers, and then I have the first calf heifer. So two 12 month heifers and a mama, and I feed at least a bale a day. Maybe about maybe 1.25 bales a day. I pay $9 a bale. I use Bermuda hay.
It's square
I
bells.
pay, yep, square bales, absolutely. And so I pay $9 per bale, and then you got to, I feed alfalfa pellets every evening. So um, it's pricey, but I get to be at home. I don't have to go to the farm.
Yeah, and how many because how many are producing milk?
One.
Okay.
That's an expensive. An expensive 2 quarts of milk. But okay, and I had a guy recently tell me that, he's like, man, if you look at your expenses, your milk's like, yeah, milk is really costing you. It is. It's costing me to grow this business. But what's the alternative? To spend, $2,500 on a cow that's going to give me a couple gallons a day, and then I'm that much further behind the eight ball, and I need to grab me a milker if I'm going to be getting a couple gallons a day. Otherwise, I'm going to be sitting underneath that cow for an hour,
Yeah.
And so if you think about all that, it's the same. Oh, so you don't want me feeding hay, you want me to go buy land. You want to talk about land payment, Dirk?
Oh,
You know
land
what I'm saying?
paying for that land, it's outrageous.
It is. And so you've got to really open up your mind to the whole gamut of what it would take for you to farm. You look at what I'm doing and people might think I'm crazy. Like, you're spending a lot of money just to get a little bit of milk. Well, I mean, I am, but I don't have a land payment, you
Yeah.
know? I mean, I didn't buy a $3,000 cow that gives me 6 gallons a day, which would have meant I had to buy a $2,400 milker months ago when I first started. So it's just all in how you look at it. You can market to yourself also, you know, and when you don't, you end up spending money you don't need to spend. So it's all in how you market it to yourself.
Yeah. So are you doing meat
Man,
chickens? Are you doing meat chickens this year? You just sticking with basically your, you know, the
I
milk?
haven't decided.
Yeah.
Remember earlier I said grow you sell the food that you like to eat. Well, and I like chicken. I'm a I'm a beef eater.
Me too, man.
You
I,
know,
I,
I'm
I
a
love chicken, but I just love eating. I love eating beef.
I do, and I absolutely love eggs. I love beef, and I love raw milk. And I don't know that I don't want to commit to no, but I'm definitely not going to commit to yes. I'm going to grow meat birds.
Yeah. Now, are you still going to the market? Do you still go to the farmers market, or do you at this point you're not doing it anymore?
Nope, I'm not past that point. That's a good if you find the right market, and it took me a while. I didn't waste a lot of money. I spent a lot of money on markets that really weren't making me a net profit. I started paying attention to my numbers, and I realized we don't need to be doing four markets. We only need to be doing that one, the one that you and I have done together.
Yeah.
That's a really good market, and it just, you know, you just got to pay attention. If there's one thing I can tell you about farmers markets, if you're going to set your farm up at a farmers market, the thing you need to do first is go visit it. You need to go up there as a patron and just check it out and see how it goes, how many people are there, and I did that with that market. Matter of fact, when they first called me about it, I told them I wasn't interested. I didn't. They told me how they set it up. They were on the phone. They were telling me about how it works, and I thought, well, that sounds lame. And then the next year they called me again, and I thought, well, I'll go take a look at it. One weekend I'll go up there, and I did, and it was nuts at how many people were up there. And I thought, man, I've been missing out. And so I go up there, and it works out good for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Farmers markets are a tricky one. You got to figure out again, like you said, if it's worth going to visit it, before you start committing to go to it, and just figuring out, hey, is it worth the time, energy, and effort to load up, get everything together, wake up on Saturday morning, or you can be able to sell enough product.
Yeah.
You know, and
And that's something I had to keep. So wake up on a Saturday morning. Well, do you have time to do your chores before you go to that market and set up? Because if you don't, you're paying somebody to do those chores. That is a farmer's market cost. That's
yeah,
a farmer's market expense because you would be doing those if you didn't have to go to that market. So you got to take a lot of things into consideration there, and then start thinking about, okay, well, what do I need to make at this farmer's market to make it worth my time?
yeah. Oh, I agree 100%. I mean, we personally don't go to, that farmer's market anymore because we're focusing on the farm store. We do a delivery run, and it gave us our weekend back. Um, so maybe one day if we want to we want more sales, yeah, then we may have to do a farmers market, but we'll just see. But
So
yeah,
that farmer's market has been good marketing for me. I have picked up delivery customers from that.
yeah,
And so that really, it's good for marketing. Sometimes you got to spend money to make money.
yeah,
And, it really helps me get uh, my deliveries to the Little Rock area.
yeah, for sure.
Otherwise, I might have to pay for advertising for people up there to know about it, or I can just set up at a market, the farmer's market. And fortunately, the sales there are good, and I pick up delivery customers.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for us, we do. a weekly delivery run kind of through that area, Heights, Hillcrest. We hit certain spots along that strip every week, and we started that the beginning of last year, kind of when you and I met in person at the market. And man, that list has grown tremendously. And this goes back to marketing. There's nothing more powerful than a raving fan and a happy customer. Because what do? They go tell their friends about it. I get my
Yeah.
food delivered. I get my chicken and my beef from this guy named Nick Gan, and it's incredible. You got to try it. And man, there's something powerful about that. And it's by far the best marketing ever.
Yeah. Sure is.
Um, well, Nick, I appreciate you taking the time to come on today, and I always love hearing from people that have been doing it for a while and that are older. You're still young, young, but you're definitely much older than me. So,
Yeah. I'm aging.
but anyways, I really appreciate you coming on. So,
Yeah. You bet. Thanks for having me.
absolutely, man.